Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. It's June. We're into the full offseason here, Sam. We are in the thick of it. So today, we're just going to rank the best and worst rosters in the NFL. We'll give you a top 5 at the top and a top 5 at the bottom.
Nice. Sounds good.
I see you're in offseason mode as well. That's good. Concise, to the point. Big show.
Tight intro.
Big show on Thursday as well, by the way. We believe we're going to have former general manager. Have I announced who it is yet? Are we close enough that I can do it? Let's do this tease. A former general manager on the show. Multiple team general manager on the show tomorrow. And we're going to ask all the questions of a general manager. Maybe even like what went wrong with Steve's interview with Michigan State? Why didn't I get the general manager job that I interviewed for? What went wrong there? So yeah, we're excited to have that going down. That'll be Thursday, 9 a.m. Remember our new start time, 9 a.m. on
and a recent
Thursday.
Former general manager as well.
Recent. Oh yeah. I mean, this is
like not one from the archives. We're not going back.
Yeah, it's not Bill Polian. All
right.
So I'll give that away. It's not Bill.
Bill would ever do the show.
I mean, that'd be good content though. That'd be good content. If you read the PFF book, you'll know. Worst meeting I've ever been a part of was with Bill. Worst meeting ever. Oh, old man yells at cloud. Old man yells at Steve. That's what happened.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Steve was the cloud.
I was the cloud that day. Absolutely. All right, man. Let's do this. We're going to do best and worst rosters. By the way, 47,000 subscribers. Appreciate everybody. Still growing here in the off season. So appreciate everybody. Hit subscribe. Do all the things, especially here on YouTube. Let's count down our best 5 to 1, and then we'll count down our worst 5. So let's do this. Best 5 rosters. Who do you have as your number 5 here, Sam?
All right, my number 5 roster. I ended up going with the Denver Broncos. Now this is kind of relying on what we saw late in the year from Bo Nix being for real, right? If he goes back in the tank, obviously this changes significantly. But if the Bo Nix development is legit, if he's going to be the guy, if he is their quarterback, and you team him with Sean Payton and everything that you expect to happen from that combination, this Denver Broncos roster, I think, is in really good shape. They are talented. They've got some depth. Maybe they're a little bit short on star power relative to some other teams, but there aren't many holes on this team.
Do you want to talk criteria really quick? We usually talk that at the top. What were you thinking? I think the challenging part of ranking rosters when we're doing this is valuing the quarterback. Do you value the coaching and everything? Because that's always going to be baked in a little bit. How are you looking at this when you were ranking rosters?
Yeah, the quarterback is always the difficult thing, right? Because that is by far the most important position in football. It's by far the most important member of the roster. So if you don't have a quarterback, it's pretty hard to have a good roster. On the other hand, if you have a really good roster, it's kind of difficult to rank it without the quarterback. So I think QB is huge. It's one of the biggest things. After that, I'm looking for kind of how complete is the team? Like, where are the holes? How many of them are there? How big are they? And then once you get into the really top teams, you're talking about, well, how good are all these players put together? How much better than the kind of the average, not even wins above average, but above or above replacement, but above average. How much better than average are all these various players? So no defined, scientific criteria, but it's like quarterback, yes or no. Holes, how many of them, where are they? And then how good are the overall baseline of all these players?
Yeah, it's our show. We could use whatever criteria we want. Again, the beauty of this thing. So it doesn't matter. Just like our breakout players, right? I don't care if a guy already broke out. I'm calling a bigger breakout. That's how I'm doing it.
Yeah,
what we did the other day. So yeah, Denver for me didn't make the top 5, but I get it, right? I mean, this is the team when we were talking about draft time, everybody was having them mocking them a tight end, and then they signed Evan Ingram to kind of fill that need heading into the draft. So they were that team that didn't have a lot of depth chart holes. I would struggle to put them here because of Bo Nix at quarterback. I think I do weigh the quarterback in these rankings. I would also maybe struggle with they don't necessarily have a ton of holes, but do they have, would they be better off if they had more star power at wide receiver or just generally a pass catcher, versus some of these other teams in the league? I'm being picky here as far as calling them a top 5 roster. I think they're in the top 10. I mean, they're in the top 10. So I think it's a very good roster. I love the depth on the defensive line. That's going to be big for me. I love some of the additions in the secondary. They have the star power at corner with, Pat Surtain, and emerging star with Nick Bonito off the edge, who looks like he's ready to get paid. So yeah, there's a lot to like about the Broncos. It's tough for me to say, year 2 of Bo Nix, calling them a top 5 roster. So my QB bias has me putting the Chiefs at number 5. And I don't know. I didn't see if the Chiefs made your top 5 or not. This is always a tricky one because I think the Mahomes factor is a factor. It's tough to separate him from Andy Reid and Spags, to be honest. I know we're talking roster and we're talking depth chart, but we've also seen so many of these players play under Andy Reid, play under Spags. And I think the depth on the defensive side is still strong despite a couple losses. They did a nice job, locking up some of their core players. Offensively, certainly offensive line's the biggest question mark. And, I think if we're charting this roster versus last year's, it's probably a step down. But right now we're that receiving core that had injuries and issues last year. Look at that: Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, and Rashee Rice coming back. So you've got that trio. The O-line questions at left tackle and left guard certainly doesn't feel as good as last year. But Mahomes still there, enough depth on the offense. And I think this is one of the best defenses in the NFL. They got torched in the Super Bowl. Still one of the best defenses in the NFL as far as defensive line depth, cornerback depth, which they added to. It's one of the better defenses, top to bottom, plus Spags, running the show there. So I get the Chiefs at number 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chiefs, this is definitely the worst roster they've been dealing with for a while. And even in the past, I think a lot of these great kind of Chiefs teams, the roster hasn't been that great for a lot of it. It's been like they're great in the right places. Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill back when he was cooking. Like they made a point of being good where you need to be good. And so I think they always got credit for having this amazing roster, but a lot of the times it wasn't that great. And this offseason, it's going to be huge. The draft class that they had, number one, we loved it, right? I think it was a great draft class, but it actually kind of needs to be quite good because they're relying on a lot of those players to patch up some of the holes that they've allowed. I don't love the cornerback group anymore. McDuffie is fantastic, but I think they've lost some depth there. I don't necessarily love the players that have stepped into those positions. The kind of long-term L'Jarius Sneed type replacements. I think the secondary in general is a little bit of a concern relative to the previous really good Chiefs teams. As you said, the offensive line, I think, is definitely a weakness relative to previous Chiefs teams. You've now got, depending on how Jalen Moore plays at left tackle. Like if Jalen Moore actually does step it up, come in as a starter, build on what he showed in limited snaps as a replacement for Trent Williams in San Francisco and actually becomes a good quality left tackle, then I kind of take it back. But potentially that offensive line is weaker than before. The wide receiver group is interesting because on the one hand, the names are great, right? Like Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, Jalen Royals, who we loved in the draft. Like they've got a lot of really impressive names, but they have, like last year, that wasn't able to translate into a kind of coherent wide receiver core, albeit, with Marquise Brown hurt, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. That might not be as good as it looks on paper. So I don't know. I think they have a good roster, definitely, but I think there are more holes on this Chiefs roster than there have been in the past.
Yeah, the only thing I'd push back there is I think even previous rosters, they've had Chris Jones on the defensive line. They had L'Jarius Sneed. Then Trent McDuffie emerged as a star. I think they've had a good, and of course they had Kelce through all those years to go with Mahomes. And the offensive line has been very good over the last couple of years. They've had since the 2020 Super Bowl, they've had a good offensive line for the most part. Last year it certainly fell apart at times with the revolving door at left tackle, but overall it's been a very good offensive line in Kansas City over these last few years. There's probably more question marks now, but yeah. I would say it's Mahomes and Reed are the starting point, but I think they've done a really nice job of having other stars and pretty good depth over these last couple of years. And they've drafted well. Like if you go back and look at what Brett Veach has done since Mahomes has been on the team, it's been one of the more efficient drafting teams as far as bringing value to, top 5 type of drafting team. So despite, to me, it doesn't, when Kansas City's roster doesn't feel as good, it's when they have a hole or two. And the questions that you brought up, those are valid because the standard is win a Super Bowl. But I still think when you put that up against a lot of rosters around the NFL, it's really good. So that's why I have the Chiefs at number 5. Where are you going to go with number 4 here?
My number 4 roster is the Buffalo Bills. I think the Bills have a really good roster now, top to bottom. Obviously, same kind of starting point. You've got Josh Allen. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. That defense has now got an insane amount of depth. Cornerback is the one spot, that cornerback 2 spot where you're a lot is resting on the shoulders of rookie Maxwell Harrison now to come in and be good right off the bat. If he is, all good, all set. If he isn't, maybe that is a potential problem spot. Same thing with the secondary, the 2 safeties. You're like, they're capable starters, but are they a step down from what they've had in the past? But the defensive line depth is crazy. The offensive line's in good shape. The wide receiver core is incredibly deep. They just don't have an ex-wide receiver and show no particular desire to get one. But top to bottom, I think the Bills have a really good roster.
You're going to mention that ex-wide receiver every time we talk about the Bills from here until the season, aren't you?
It's just such a fascinating dynamic for a team to be like, we don't have this skill set and we don't care, and we're just going to go on without one.
I don't think that's the decision. I think they think Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer can do those things. I think that's
quite clearly neither one of those guys has ever demonstrated the capacity to play with a plus return on that particular skill set. Like, you can say, I can take any wide receiver in the NFL and just tell you he's my ex receiver, but if he's never shown the ability to play that position before or demonstrated that particular skill set, I mean, this is just propaganda.
Well, I've got the Bills at number 2 as far as my roster goes. So I have them even higher. I mean, I think, again, last year at this time, there's a little bit of turnover on both sides of the ball, and pretty much everybody that stepped in, you feel pretty good about it. I thought the defensive depth the last couple of years got beat up, and they went and attacked that. How many times have I mentioned, you're going to talk X receiver, I'm going to talk about them rolling 12 deep on the defensive line, even if half of them is suspended for the first 6 games. So the depth on the defensive line, the way they attacked the draft on the defensive side, I thought is going to add a ton of depth to this roster. Once again, have to mention the quarterback situation. Just having Josh Allen as a starting point is going to be huge. So that's going to elevate the roster. And for whatever questions you have about X receiver, they still score a ton of points. Allen's going to be the engine there. I thought they did a really nice job of taking care of the ball, playing to Allen's strengths last year. And the thing I always tend to repeat about the Bills, the more games we see every year of them winning without Josh Allen having to take over, right? Like, let's rewind 2, 3, 4 years. Every single key third down, every single key play had to be Josh Allen. It didn't have to be Josh Allen, but they said, hey, we're going to put the ball in his hands. Last year, we saw James Cook make some big plays. I mean, that James Cook 1-yard touchdown run against Kansas City in the AFC Championship, that would have gone down as one of the most legendary runs in NFL history, maybe, certainly in Bills history, if they had just, gotten over the hump and, made it to the Super Bowl. And so James Cook became a big-time player for them last year. The run game. So they found a way to win in several different ways. Obviously, that's connected to coaching as well. I think they've done a really nice job evolving that scheme over the last couple of years to incorporate more in the run game. I think that offensive line, top to bottom, having everybody back continuity-wise is huge. Spencer Brown looks like a future star. I mean, he had a massive breakout season last year at right tackle, looks like a future star. Greg Rousseau, I called my breakout player because I'm calling him to be more of a top 10 type of edge rusher instead of merely top 15 to 20. So I think they have the star power. Christian Benford, the way he broke out last year, they have the star power, they have the depth, and they've done a really nice job making sure that they're I just think that they're too deep is a big part of me putting them at number 2. defensive line depth, secondary depth, some of those places that really hurt them in the last couple of years, I think they've shored up.
Yeah, no, I think they're in really good shape again. This is and better than they were. Like last season was supposed to be kind of not a rebuild, but maybe let's just try and consolidate. Let's just try and be good this year. And if things break our way, fine, but we're probably not going to be a true sort of elite contender. And then they were as good as ever last year, and I think that helps this season. Now you're further ahead maybe than you thought you would be in this kind of evolution of the roster.
All right, so your number 4 is the Bills. I put them all the way up at 2. I have the Baltimore Ravens at number 4, and so I mean this is close. I mean I think for these last couple teams, the Ravens, interesting team coming into last year because I think they had a few more questions on the offensive line than you would like to see when you're just charting these things. But obviously it worked out well. Lamar Jackson's coming off of his best statistical season despite not winning the MVP. They added Derrick Henry to the mix last year, and I think you saw his value at various points during the year, especially late in games. I don't think DeAndre Hopkins puts them over the top or anything at receiver, but I don't think he needs to. I think that's a nice buy low to just kind of add some depth to the receiver room. Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers there. We saw Isaiah Likely take on more of a role last year. Mark Andrews is still on the roster. I mean, when you go top to bottom, I think there's a couple offensive linemen where you would say, hey, if Lamar Jackson's not our quarterback, I'm not feeling as good about this whole line, but Lamar helps elevate that because of the run pass threat and everything he brings to the table. And I keep referencing star power because I think it matters. Like having high impact players matters. So I think this combination of a star like Kyle Hamilton who could do it all in the secondary and play multiple roles. We saw him play in and around the line of scrimmage, saw him play free safety, and just really good depth in that linebacker room, right? Not as deep, I don't think, as they were maybe in 2023, where you literally looked up and down the roster, like when Patrick Queen was still there, and the offensive line just had a few more, dependable players, guys with more of a track record. But they are solid top to bottom with star power, certainly with Lamar, Henry, Kyle Hamilton, and like once again, really like where the Ravens are heading into the season.
Yeah, they were my number 3 roster in the league. Top to bottom, there's very little in the way of weaknesses. Obviously, they've got Lamar Jackson, so they've got the quarterback. They've got one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and a guy who doesn't just play well, doesn't just make things difficult for the opposition, but I think does raise the level of other people around him. Way back when there was that the debate was around Ronnie Stanley and how elite is he as a pass blocker versus how much is Lamar Jackson helping him out. I think you can extend that out to the entire offensive line now, and Derrick Henry is a part of that as well. So you've got, if you were picking a hole in this roster, you would say, I don't really like any of the guards they have on the roster. But last season, I think shows that it just doesn't matter. Like neither one of those guards, none of those guards may be particularly good, but with the combination of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the backfield, it doesn't really impact the run game. And with Lamar Jackson, a quarterback, it doesn't really impact the pass game either. So I don't know that it's a big deal at all. And that's probably by far the weakest area of this entire roster. Receiving core is in good shape. Maybe they're similar to Buffalo in terms of missing that, one X receiver that maybe could be transformative. But again, they've been missing that for a few years and it hasn't made a big difference. Elsewhere, like you're looking on the roster trying to find weak spots. There aren't really any. Maybe Malachi Starks is a weak spot simply because he's a rookie and we don't know if he's going to be good yet. But again, similar to Buffalo with Maxwell Hairston, it's like there's some pressure on him because you need him to start right away. But this is a team without weaknesses, really.
You could say maybe outside corner if you're calling Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins as the starting corners, but with Humphrey kicking into the slot, who plays outside, and nickel is a Chidobe Awuzie, some other young players there. So yeah, there's very few holes on this Ravens roster. So I put them. I put them at 4. You put them at 3. So we're on to number 3 right now.
First, obviously, you wouldn't factor this in because they're dead to you. But first time without Justin Tucker as a kicker for a long time, so that's a new variable for Baltimore.
It is. I mean, when he was at his best, I mean, there was before he got the yips, was it last year? I don't think it started the year. Maybe started in the AFC Championship the year before. But before he got the yips last year, I mean, incredible weapon. The number of times that end of half, end of game, you just set up a 60-yarder and he's making it, or you're just in opposing territory and you're at least getting 3 with Tucker.
I mean, to kind of sum up the Justin Tucker career, I mean, obviously at the moment he's dealing with a bunch of sexual misconduct accusations, and that's part of why I don't think he's there anymore. But as a kicker for his NFL career, the thing that made Justin Tucker unique is every piece of data, when you studied kickers, when you analyzed kickers, when you dove into the information, you could have people that would rival Justin Tucker, but they never did it for more than a couple of years, right? So you could find elite kickers, but the problem was none of these elite kickers ever sustained it for any period of time. And almost every single one of them would have a period of time where they weren't elite anymore. And it's why when you look at most kickers' careers, even you go find the guys that are the sort of top 10 points, players in NFL history, it's not for one team, right? Very rarely do those kickers hang around in one spot. The Morton Anderson, Gary Anderson, those guys played for half the league. They just kept going from one team to the next, because eventually you reach this point where you shank a kick in an NFC Championship game, or you miss an important one, or you go on a run where you forget how to kick and that team gets rid of you and the next one brings you in, then you rediscover yourself. The thing that made Justin Tucker unique is he was consistently elite for a decade, just start to finish, most accurate kicker in the league, 90+%, amazing from distance, and never dropped the standards right up until last year, when all these accusations came out. And I don't know if they're connected or not, or if that's just when it happened for him. But he was unique because he was the elite kicker that everybody's searching for, and consistently that. He never dropped those standards. And the Ravens have had that in their back pocket for the last, decade or so. So it's probably a big deal that they don't have that for the first time in a long time.
No, it absolutely is. It's a factor for the Ravens. And again, if we're being picky, 2023, they certainly looked like the best, most complete team in the league, losing the AFC Championship to the Chiefs. I think their depth has taken a bit of a hit since then, but still one of the better rosters in the NFL. So I had the Ravens at 4. You had them at 3. Is that what we're saying? Yep. So I'm on to number 3 here. So my number 3 is the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, number 3. I mean, they've gotten younger. They've taken a slight hit this offseason roster-wise, and I think it's close at the top. I put the Bills ahead of them, obviously, at number 2, and a mystery team at number 1. We don't know yet. We don't know. But yeah, I think the Eagles being here because they've lost 3 starters this offseason and replaced them with some promising young players, but more question marks here. So that's a big part of it for me. Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, they're out. How are we going to replace those guys? Is it Jahad Campbell, the first-round pick, rushing off the edge potentially? Jalix Hunt, who we have as a breakout player, who did kind of break out in the playoff run last year. Moro Ajomo up front, replacing the Milton Williams production. But those are on paper steps back for Philadelphia, so that needs to be factored in. You've got right guard Mekhi Becton moving on. And once again, last summer, we weren't saying, hey, what's that?
4 starters then.
Who did I miss?
Darius Slay.
Oh, and Darius Slay. Yeah, and Dory Jackson. I mean, I'm a Dory Jackson fan, but he comes in and probably fills some of those spots. So yeah, that's why they're here for me. They still have one of the better rosters, but each one of those spots, right? Like last summer, we weren't saying, hey, Mekhi Becton's going to be great. We were like, hey, it's a nice buy low and, nice reclamation project. And he was. I mean, he had a really nice season, playing right next to Lane Johnson, helping that run game, bringing some big-time blocks to the table. But you've got a question there if it's Tyler Steen or Matt Pryor, working to fill in there. So those are my questions. I mean, the good, why are they here though? I mean, that's why they're at 3, Sam, right? I'm coming at it from the negative sense. Why are they here? They've got the quarterback as well with Jalen Hurts. They have Saquon Barkley, MVP candidate. last year. They've got the 1-2 punch of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Despite losing Mekhi Becton, they've got 4 really good starters on the offensive line, including the best tackle tandem in the NFL, Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. They still have very good defensive line depth, and their secondary was a question, right? It was an unknown, we'll say, going into last year. And Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean showed, hey, they could play right away as rookies. So the depth across the roster is excellent. They're still strong in the places where they like to be strong, which is the trenches. There's just a few more unknowns on this roster than there were over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean they've leaned into some of the young players and they're relying on that depth stepping up and now assuming a bigger role, but they've done that for a while. I think this is still the best roster in the NFL. They're number 1 on my list. Top to bottom, I think this is still a fantastic roster with a ton of depth still. Even if you're, relying on guys like Maro Ajomo to step up and have a bigger role, Jalix Hunt to step up and have a bigger role. I mean, I think those guys have already shown that they're able to do that, and maybe there'll be a step down from Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, but I wouldn't be expecting a big drop off. I think bringing in guys like Josh Uche, he's been prior in his NFL career, he's been a really useful situational pass rusher. I kind of anticipate him being paired with Vic Fangio suddenly having a career resurgence. Like if Josh Uche suddenly looks like a really impressive rotational body on this defensive line, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. They've got a couple of guys like that who are, I think we're sort of ignoring for reasons that they've been relatively disappointing in previous stops in their career. But within this defense specifically, with the role that they'll have, with the rotation that they'll have, and with Vic Fangio, may see a massive jump forward in reputation and how good we think they are. So I think that defensive line is still really good with incredible depth. Now you've got linebacker secondary in incredible shape, like linebacker. So they did lose some starters. They did, however, bring back Zach Bond. You've still got Nakobe Dean. You've still got Jeremiah Trotter Jr. They've drafted more linebackers as well. Like the linebacker depth for the Eagles is insane for a team that we keep hearing about. The Eagles don't really care about linebacker. They don't prioritize that. Suddenly they've got like the best linebacker depth in the NFL.
Well, it depends on what they really think of Jihad Campbell, if he is playing linebacker or if they do actually want him dabbling as an edge rusher.
Yeah, and then you're right. The X factor of what exactly Jihad Campbell is going to be within this defense, what his deployment is going to look like. And they came back later in the draft and drafted my anagram, Smail Mondon Jr. So
I guess it's Smile.
Smile. But you got linebacker depth. Genuinely, the Eagles, for a team where everyone, the Eagles don't care about linebackers. Show me a better linebacker depth chart than what the Eagles have right now.
It's a good point. I mean, look, it's an excellent roster, Sam. Andrew Makuba probably steps in, playing safety next to Ed Reed Blankenship there, but he's a rookie. So you've got a couple more unknowns on this roster than you've had.
But unlike a couple of other teams where you're saying, okay, if what happens if he doesn't work out as the starter as a rookie starter in the secondary, like who's the next guy? So if Maxwell Hairston doesn't play well for Buffalo, suddenly you're turning to Tre'Davious White, who was previously a great cornerback, but right now looks like he can't really play in the NFL, right? If Makuba can't play, I have no problem with Sidney Brown being the starter and being fine, right? Like that. I think the Eagles are better insulated for the players that they do have to rely on than some of these other teams.
Yeah. So they're your number 1, right? I mean, it was tough to separate these.
No, we're splitting hairs with any top 5 roster in the NFL. They're all good.
The one thing I'll say, because we'll get to your number 2 in a minute here, of the teams we've listed, I mentioned the Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens in my top 5. I think they clearly have a quarterback advantage as well. And then player by player, I think they're all very good rosters. The Eagles and then the other team you're about to mention here, I would argue, I'm not trying to offend Eagles fans here, but I think we'd all agree that Jalen Hurts is probably a step down from Mahomes, Jackson, Lamar, and Allen. Insert quote about Jalen Hurts outplayed Patrick Mahomes in 2 straight Super Bowls. Yes, true. Absolutely. We're talking 17 game schedule plus playoffs here, right? So the job that Howie Roseman has done in Philadelphia to build this depth around a good, not top 4 quarterback in Jalen Hurts and be able to win the Super Bowl, I think, that shows how good of a job they've done. And then the next team you're going to mention here, no offense to their quarterback, but he's not as good as everyone else. So the depth that you build and the star power that you build around that quarterback to be as good as you are, that just shows how great the front offices have been.
Yeah, no, it does. Hertz is a really interesting case study, though, now. Like, you and I were both part of some offseason project to basically rank the best quarterbacks in the Super Bowl era, right? And it's like, how do you quantify these things, right? There's stats, there's all these things. Then there's the feels. Joe Montana was a great feels quarterback, right? But I don't want to dismiss that as like a punchline or a thing that doesn't really matter. Like, I think there's something to that. This idea of like he only ever won in the Super Bowl, right? 4-0 in Super Bowls is Joe Montana's sort of calling card as a statistic. But the real thing to me is when you go back and you kind of study Joe Montana's career, number one, it was kind of punctuated by insane comebacks all the way along, right? From like high school, college, all the way through the NFL. Like he's and each sort of era, each part of his NFL career, there's a comeback. There's a story somewhere there, like a ridiculous, implausible, absurd comeback that only Joe Montana could make. He's got one of those like every step of the way. And I don't think that that's just a series of flukes, right? I don't think he just got lucky 8 times randomly throughout his career and that sort of sustained it. There was something to this idea that everybody there believed Joe Montana was going to create the comeback. And you listen to like Ronnie Lott and, players like that. They could be 25 points down with Montana being responsible for half the points, right? With interceptions. And every single person in the huddle believed Montana was the guy that was going to create the comeback. I think that's a real thing, and that's impossible to quantify. So what makes Jalen Hurts interesting is, yes, they've created this incredibly good roster around him, and obviously that helps, right? Like, any quarterback in the NFL is better with a better roster around them. But I also think that it's interesting that Jalen Hurts seems to be incredibly mentally resilient, right? This is somebody that was benched in the national title game in college for cause, right? Like, they were right to bench him. They sat him down and they were immediately better with Tua at the quarterback. It was the correct decision. But it was also a decision that could easily have like immediately broken the quarterback that you benched. That could have been the end of his career. Instead, he goes somewhere else, lights it up, looks great, gets himself on an NFL roster where there was already an incumbent quarterback, beat that guy out eventually. And as you said, has now beaten Mahomes in a Super Bowl twice, has outplayed Mahomes in a Super Bowl twice, has won one of those, has won a game in the Super Bowl, and has played basically the 2 best games of his career in the most important situations. I think there's something to Jalen Hurts being one of those guys where, when the chips are down, he is going to play his best. And obviously that's not a universal constant, right? You're never going to play your best it's not directly,
right.
It's not a direct correlation. Like, the most important game, you're going to play your best the next. But I do think that's part of Jalen Hurts' makeup. And there's no matter all the stats out there, all the situational data, all the, the advanced numbers, I don't think you're ever going to get that close to being able to accurately quantify that. And that is what Jalen Hurts is bringing to the table on top of being good, good, not great, but then he's got this thing.
Hurts might be the closest thing to the phrase that we don't love. The guy just wins. I mean, you don't like that as a general phrase, but if you were describing Jalen Hurts, he's probably the closest thing to that, because you'd be hard pressed to find stats that put him in the top 5, right? Unless you're unless you're adding up touchdowns, and they do have the tush push domination, but you would say across Alabama, Oklahoma, and now in Philadelphia, he's found a way to win. I think there's another element to what he brings to the run game, which is because it's not like a sexy looking run game, right? There's not a whole lot of flash plays like a Lamar or a Josh Allen even, but it's efficient, and that puts the defense in a bind. And when Saquon Barkley shows up to Philadelphia, not only will he be playing behind his best offensive line, but now with a really good run threat at quarterback, which helps open up everything as well. So all those little things definitely add up, in addition to what you're saying, whether it's leadership, intangibles, or whatever, just finding a way to show up at the right times. Yeah, there's a lot to Hurts' game that you like, but obviously if you go back throw for him versus some of the other quarterbacks in the league, Sam, there's a healthy debate between Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott. And I know Eagles fans hates that, right? I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean? Jalen Hurts does it in the playoffs. Like, what do you mean? But I mean, there's a pretty healthy debate if you go back throw for throw versus both of those guys. But you could definitely argue that the big difference for Hurts versus Dak is the Cowboys and Dak tend to fold in bigger, like, again, not every time, but they tend to fold in the biggest games, and Hurts doesn't. So who cares what happens throw for throw? Like, I want the guy that's going to show up when it counts.
Oh, I think you could easily argue that on a play-by-play, throw-for-throw basis, Dak Prescott has been a better NFL quarterback than Jalen Hurts at this point. But if you asked most people, I think certainly now, with recency bias being what it is, if you ask most people now, who would you want tomorrow for a game, random team, random roster, you don't know anything about him, everyone's taking Jalen Hurts over Dak Prescott right now. And I'm aware of like the danger of opening that door to sort of lending credence to this idea of why he's just a winner and it's just clutch and it's all that kind of stuff, right? Because I think most of the time that analysis is, number one, it's lazy, and number two, it's inaccurate, right? But I do think that there's something to that with specific players sometimes. Not all the time, and not most of the time it's thrown around there. But I do think that there might be something to the idea that Jalen Hurts, I don't want to say is just a winner or, but that he has a difficult to quantify mental resilience that powers him to greater results than he should be getting based off what he does on a play-by-play basis.
That's why, remember, we gotta listen clearly here, right? You and the listeners, right? Closest thing to he's just a winner, but you described it with certainly more depth here, right? Well, we're not in shouty show world here. Jalen Hurts is the best winner in the NFL. I would take Jalen Hurts over Josh Allen tomorrow because he just wins. Like that's a fake statement. I didn't actually. Right. I don't believe that.
It's like everything else, right? Like none of this is. It's not always 100. Like none of it is 100% of the answer to anything, right? With the thing that makes football so interesting and so intriguing and provides people like us with endless amount of content is. It's always a bit of something and a bunch of other things. We keep saying there's always confounding variables, right? So even if there is power to this idea of clutch and mental toughness and the X factor, or whatever you want to call this, just being a winner, it's not 100%, right? Like the guy's never going to win everything. You can't put him on the worst roster in the NFL right now and say, well, immediately just putting Jalen Hurts on this roster means they're a playoff team because all he does is win. Like it's only part of it, but it might mean that if you put him on the same roster as a guy like Dak Prescott, he would get better results because he's got that part of it. Like, and the difficulty is always like with Brock Purdy, how do you quantify that and how much is that worth, relative and weighing, the mental part of it and what he's able to do, that X factor, the unquantifiables versus what is actually quantifiable and what he's doing on the field. On a down-to-down basis. Like, that's where this gets tricky.
All right, so all that said, I have the Eagles at 3. You put them at 1. We have one more team to discuss. This is your number 2 and also my number 1. So who's next?
Number 1. So I'm assuming we've gone with the same team here and have gone for the Detroit Lions.
Detroit Lions. You're number 2. For me, best roster in the NFL. I'll let you start. Why are the Lions at 2?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you're talking about any of these teams at the top 5, I think you're splitting hairs. They're all incredibly good. Lions have an amazing team. Roster's in really good shape. I love what they've done in terms of patching up holes when they've emerged. The one exception is maybe unlike any of these other teams, I think you're looking and saying they have a weakness. And if you're looking at the Lions' weakness, I would think you would say, and now, admittedly, it's a secondary player. Secondary as in primary, secondary, tertiary, as opposed to the defensive secondary. But they don't have a second edge rusher. And their primary edge rusher is coming back off a gruesome leg break. And we hope that he'll be 100% and he'll look like the same player, but we don't know that yet. So Aiden Hutchinson has been a superstar. Let's hope he continues to be one. Their second edge rusher might be Marcus Davenport, who's basically been a write-off player for the last several years across multiple different teams. Now they're incredibly strong in the interior to offset that. They've been loading up and reloading and bolstering there. I love what they've done in the defensive secondary, in the backfield. Linebacker's good. The offense is amazing. But I think that's the hair that I'm splitting, or that's the nit that I'm picking on this roster is, unlike some of these other teams, I would look at that and say that's not just a question mark. It's a defined weakness.
Yeah. So, I mean, I see the same thing. The interesting one for me is like, if I'm splitting hairs between the Lions, Bills, and the Eagles at the top here, I mean, I would probably make the case that the Bills starting 22 has the fewest holes, I think, off the top of my head. Whereas the Eagles have a couple replacements that we talked about, and the Lions have the edge rush question. I think where the Lions put it over the top for me is the depth outside of edge, the depth and the star power. So you're talking about comparing them to, say, Philly and Buffalo and everything. They don't have the same level of quarterback as the Bills, Ravens, or Chiefs. I think it's right. And you'd probably say Goff, step down from Hurts, or, I don't know. I'm not even going to open up the Goff versus Hurts can right now.
They might be in the same category. Goff might be
different ends of the tiers or whatever.
Well, he's like the same, maybe the same category as Hurts, but without that it factor that we just spent 5 minutes breaking down. I don't think anyone really believes that Goff has that, but that might be the difference between him and Hurts.
As I'm saying with the Lions, the star power of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell at right tackle, Aiden Hutchinson, Brian Branch, what Kirby Joseph did at safety last year, Jack Campbell emerging at linebacker. Then in addition to that, all of the depth, right? The fact that, hey, like on paper, not having Carlton Davis this year looks a little bit worse, but they bring in DJ Reed, plus they drafted Terrion Arnold and Ines Rakestraw last year. So I think they've just done an unbelievable job adding all that depth. For the edge rush question, it's a fair one opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Still think they, might explore some moves like they did last year, bringing in Zadarius Smith. But instead of having that next edge, is this the best defensive tackle group in the NFL with Alim McNeil, DJ Reader, Levi and Wuzarike coming back, and then drafting Tyleik Williams in the first round? And so instead of going edge, they just went, hey, we're going to have defensive tackle depth. If we're nitpicking them, right guard, right? We have a question here with Kevin Zeitler moving on, Christian Mahogany likely stepping in at right guard, who played well in limited time, but that's more of an unknown than it's been in the past, where you could really look top to bottom on that offensive line and say this is the best offensive line in the NFL. I still think it's there. I still think it's close. The other factor, if you want to weigh it, is the coordinator question that we've cited throughout the offseason. So it's the same group, but no Aaron Glenn on the defensive side, no Ben Johnson on the offensive side. We saw what happened to the Eagles a couple of years ago, where they had great players, great depth, right? We're raving about what Jalen Hurts does in these clutch situations. Hurts looked lost in the second half of 2023, as did their defense, looked even more lost in Philadelphia because the coordinator situation. So even though I'm looking at this top to bottom saying the roster player for player is the best, the coordinator thing, if it's not a seamless transition, then it won't matter the players that are on the team. But I just think roster depth, star power, everything Detroit has built is the best in the league.
Yeah, the nits to pick, I think, are the second edge spot, as we talked about before. You mentioned Mahogany. I think Mahogany's definitely a potential question mark. I think they drafted Tate Ratledge, one of your guys from Georgia in the draft. So that's a good, backup insulation plan for that, in case that doesn't go well.
He might be the guy. I think there's legitimate competition there as well. So. Yeah.
It's also worth at least bringing up Terrion Arnold, the former last year's first round pick. Basically got barbecued as a rookie. We liked him a lot, so we still have faith, and he's penciled in to start right now. If he doesn't, he needs to get better, though. If he plays the same level as he did as a rookie, that's a problem spot as the cornerback number 2. opposite DJ Reed, who they just brought in. Again, they've got some contingency, like you have Ennis Rakestraw, who they also drafted a year ago. So now only one of those guys needs to be good. Or, Amik Robertson, who was playing really well last year, already showed he could step out and become an outside corner when they want him in the slot, really. So they can juggle it and make it work. But, if Arnold doesn't get better in year 2, it's weaker than it looks on paper right now.
The other factor here too, for me, like if you just list all the receivers, I don't think you're saying this is one of the better groups, but they all just fit so well. Like Jameson Williams has those games where he is just the speed threat that they put him into good situations to use that. They have the great Tim Patrick, actually, so maybe the depth chart is pretty good. But Amon-Ra St. Brown has those games where he's going to make 10 to 15 catches and almost all for first downs. I mean, look, it's not the best on paper receiving group, but you're never watching Jared Goff and the Lions saying, oh man, they could really use an extra weapon. The depth of the weapons, the way they use them, the speed that they have with Khalif Raymond and Jameson Williams, the slot and inside presence of Amon-Ra and Laporta, they're all used extremely well. So I like so much of what the Lions have done. I mean, the biggest challenge here is going to be the coordinators and then the mental aspect, right? This mental aspect of they're coming off of 2 really good seasons and a season last year where they looked like the best team in the NFL for a big chunk of it, and then had a disappointing run in the playoffs, either in the NFC Championship where they blow a second half lead, or last year where they have all the turnovers and they lose as heavy favorites against Washington in the divisional round at home. So how do they handle the mental aspect of things? But I think when you're looking at the roster top to bottom, this is the best.
Yeah, and I'm going to be so fascinated to see what they get out of Isaac Tesla, the rookie from Arkansas, just because this has been one of the best drafting teams in the NFL since Brad Holmes and Campbell became a thing. And you've got this guy Tesla who was incredibly non-productive in college, in a situation, with some rough quarterback play, but is one of the best athletes in this draft, like 6'4", 215, blew up the combine, crazy athleticism. What do they know that everybody else doesn't? And they went hard after him in terms of trading up. Like they valued him extremely highly in this draft. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe this is where the hubris, they get ahead of themselves. They start huffing their own farts too much, and they're drafting these guys where it's like, look, this is rookie 101, how not to draft. Or maybe this is a case where they knew stuff that everyone else missed, and he's going to end up outperforming that draft position.
It is one of those moves where if a different team made it, would be like, man, what do you do? This is
right.
Bad teams stay bad. You went and got this, no production receiver who's just a size speed projection. But when a team with a recent history of success does it, it's like, what do they know? What do they know? Have they done it again? And they loved him enough to, for the 2 picks.
And I think it's fair to bring that up, right? And I also think that's why the attitude to that pick should not be, oh, it's great because the Lions are great at this, right? It should be I think it's fair to say, I think it's fair to treat them differently, right? I don't think it's hypocrisy to say that if a bad team did that, you'd be like, well, this is why they're bad, right? But if a good team does it, you don't give that answer, but you don't praise it either. Like the correct response, I think, should be, well, this will be interesting to see, right? This is now an interesting draft pick, right? I am willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that this is bad process generally, but you've been good in this area, so let's see. As opposed to, well, you've been good in this area, so therefore you can do no wrong, right? I am at least willing to see how this works out. But with the starting point of generally, this is not the way you're supposed to do it.
I'm also less likely to criticize a size speed type of move at receiver. You know what I mean? Like if it was for a random guard who was not very good in college and you're like, oh, this is our guy, we have to go get him, I think I'd be more critical of it. But for a speed receiver, like for a guy that's super like fast, explosive, and big, where you can, and a team, it's not only a team that has hit on draft picks, it's a team that has used the speed receiver extremely well, right? I think those things are adding up that I'm fascinated to see what Tesla does for the Lions.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to be negative, Sam?
Yeah.
We're gonna count down here as well. So we'll start with roster number 28 out of 32 in our hypothetical top 32. We didn't have to rank the other 22, so we just gave you a top 5 and a bottom 5. So who's worst roster? So number 5 here, counting down to the worst roster.
I will say before we start the negative part, we've done this for a few years now, and every time we get to the bottom of the list, I'm sort of surprised by how not terrible the rosters are, right? We started doing this years ago, and when we were doing those, you would get to rosters at the bottom of the league, and like, this team is garbage, like almost top to bottom. This is a terrible roster, holes everywhere, no good players, like complete dumpster fire of a roster. Those don't exist anymore. Like, they really don't. This is this constant theme. Everything we talk about, free agency, the draft, all these things, teams collectively are getting better at this. Like, you just don't really have these teams that are in complete and total destitute positions. And obviously the single biggest thing that we talked about at the start is the quarterback situation. So you'll be propelled towards the bottom of the rankings fast if you simply have no quarterback to speak of. And, you know, one of these teams certainly is in that position. But overall, like, I just, the bottom 5, you're not looking at these teams being like, there's nothing good to say about this roster.
Yeah, I didn't love picking the bottom 5. It's challenging too, Sam, because we keep saying that, right? I think the NFL is doing a better job at deploying talent across the league. However, it's this zero-sum game. Like, it's even though the NFL is doing better with that, it doesn't mean, oh, well, everybody's going to be, you know, have between 6 and 10 wins this year. I mean, there'll still be a whole bunch of 3 and 4 win teams this year, despite seemingly the roster strength, you know, closing in toward the middle.
But critically, I do think it's getting more difficult to be like the 08 Lions, right? Like, I think it's getting harder to now lose every single game because you're just so much worse than everybody else out there. Even the worst teams in the NFL are good enough that they can scare a team randomly or they can win a game. You know, it's just, I don't know if, I think something is going to need to change for us to see the return of like winless, abysmal football teams again.
All right, let's start. 5th worst roster.
With all that being said, the 5th worst roster in the NFL, according to me, is the Miami Dolphins. I just think this thing's kind of fallen apart for them. They've gone from being, maybe they were never a true elite contender, but they were kind of being talked about as in that bucket, you know, as in the AFC contender category for the last couple of years going into seasons. And this is not really a negative reflection on Tua, who I think within this offense in particular is a good, capable quarterback. But when they trade away or cut Jalen Ramsey, they have a cornerback room that's abysmal. Like, Storm Duck is a starting cornerback for them. Cam Smith is a starting cornerback for them. The secondary generally is in rack and ruin. The offensive line we saw last season was a mess. The receiving core that's supposed to be so dynamic and so explosive, suddenly there's creaks in this group. They're not looking like they used to. Tyreek Hill is dumping a cryptic tweet every 5 minutes, and that usually spells, you know, eventual disaster. This is just not a good roster anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. I had a tough time putting them in the bottom 5 just because of that core. You know, they still have Tua, Waddle, and Tyreek, no matter how cryptic the tweets are, no matter how Tyreek regressed. Yeah, the offensive line doesn't look great. I think they still have some players on the defensive line, especially if they're healthy, right? Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson, if they're all healthy, that's still pretty good. They had a sneaky good defense last year, but that was with Jalen Ramsey, so we're assuming he's not there. So it's a factor. I mean, I think they're in the bottom 10. I don't know if I would put them fully in the bottom 5, and I hate my bottom 5 because I hate it because there's all teams. I'm like, I kind of like what they've done and where they're going.
I think
so.
I thought there were like 2 teams that were clearly bottom 5, and then the rest of it is like the next 10 teams are chaotic. Yeah. It's like pick your least favorite.
There's not even that year like where the Cardinals a couple years ago I thought were the clear number 32, but it was almost like they were opting into it. It's like, hey, we know we don't have Kyler Murray's out this season. Like, let's just rebuild this whole thing. It was easy to put them last a couple of years ago. I have the New England Patriots at 5th worst. And I don't feel great about that because there's definitely a lot to like about their offseason, both sides of the ball. I think the cornerback room looks good. The defensive line depth looks so much better. The offensive line looks better, but we're still dealing with question marks here. And so the phrase I've kept coming back to is it still might be a year away from these moves coming good and really showing up. Again, dependent on Drake May's development. I thought Drake May played well last year. In a bad situation, and if the situation's a little bit better, we've said the range of outcomes for the Patriots is all over the place. Like they could win 10 if May takes this big step forward, and they do creep back to an average in a lot of these spots. But would it surprise you if the Patriots won 6 this year? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised with 6 or 10 or anything in between for New England. So now you've got the Stephon Diggs question, and it's not like this receiver room. There's a lot of bodies, but it's not like there's a lot of established impact players there. So there's still questions on this roster. I hate putting them in the bottom 5 right now because of all the moves that they've made, but just not sure if they're completely there yet. And depending on rookies who might take a year before they develop.
Yeah, I had the Patriots as the 3rd worst roster. That key phrase is the right one. Like the range of outcomes for this team is so wide. Like this could be the worst roster in the NFL, or they could be a 10-win football team. And I don't think either one of those things is entirely outlandish based off how much is an unknown variable, right? So much rests on the performance of new pieces, rookies, new coach, new free agents that they brought in. And we have no real idea how any of it is going to work right now. Like Stephon Diggs is one of the solutions at wide receiver, and who knows what the hell that's going to be based off, videos of him with random substances, etc.
Scott Zolak, former backup QB and of course radio announcer and local personality in New England, he said there's a chance he gets released.
That's what I'm saying.
He said that is an actual, that's in the range of outcomes as well as Stephon Diggs gets released.
Even before that video surfaced, like the idea of this guy at his age coming off an ACL, like who the hell knew what? Like we even outside of that, we have no idea what Stephon Diggs is going to bring to the table. Now you add that on top of it, that just increases the range, right? From he could be their number 1 receiver and be a really useful 1,000-yard player again, or he could add nothing of value, right? All that's happened since then is you've lowered that range even further to actually he gets cut before we even see him on the field, in addition to the range that was already there. So that range is chaotic. We don't know if you're going to see anything from the duo from a year ago, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, receiver. Now you've got Kyle Williams added to that mix as well, a rookie. So the receiving core is all over the place in terms of what it could bring to the table. It could bring a lot. It could bring nothing again. I think you've got a similar story in the offensive line. Will Campbell comes in as the high value, the addition to try and really make a massive impact on that line. And we don't even know if he can play tackle because of his stumpy arms and his unprecedented wingspan. He might be a guard who can't play left tackle and only marginally upgrades a guard spot after half the season of failing at left tackle, which means he was probably a net wash relative to a year ago. Or he could be the solution, right? SEC left tackle. He's been really good for, 4 straight years in college. He could step in day one and be a massive upgrade on the offensive line. So huge range of outcomes there. It's just, this is such a weird roster where like everything is could be great or terrible.
I didn't even realize that you had them 3rd worst. I thought I was stretching it here because I had a tough time putting them in my bottom 5 because look, I would sum it up as there's hope. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of potential upside, but like we said, it's tough to rank them and say, okay, we feel great about where the roster is right now, even though last year you could argue they were 32, like they were in the running to be the worst, so they're at least moving in the right direction here. Who do you have as the 4th worst roster in the NFL?
4th worst team, I went with the Cleveland Browns. This is the one that I struggle with the most. Like the quarterback situation is huge because it's a punchline at the moment, right? They've got this joke of a quarterback room where they've got a ton of money committed to a guy who's, for all intents and purposes, not on the roster. Deshaun Watson. Then you've got this farce of a competition between Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, and two rookies, Dylan Gabriel, and the headlines that are Shedeur Sanders, to the point where the circus, like Renner posted this on his Twitter the other day, like they're putting stats out there for like rookie mini camps, right? You know, the way they do in training camp where it's like, he went, they're doing that snap by snap. This is going to be the story from now until the end of this joke, right? So it's an absolute mess of a quarterback situation until or unless one of those guys just grabs hold of the job and crushes it to the point where he becomes the unquestioned starter. And you have to hope it's one of the rookies. Otherwise, that's just a mess. And then you look at the rest of this roster, and okay, it's not terrible, but it has been chipped away at relative to where it was in previous years. Like the offensive line, the receiving core, the defense, the secondary, it's all just worse than it used to be.
Yeah, so I did not have the Browns in my bottom five. I struggled with this because let's remember when we're reviewing every game last year and going into the season, we're like, well, the roster's good in Cleveland. Yeah. The quarterback's just the biggest question. And then Deshaun Watson goes out there and you're like, man, he is just dragging down everyone. This offensive line, by the way, like Andrew Berry had built 4, 5, 6 years of a good offensive line in Cleveland. The thing that I don't love about Cleveland is when I look at the offensive line, the 1 year remaining on everybody's contract for Joel Bitonio and Ethan Pocic and Wyatt Teller and Jack Conklin. I still think it's a fine offensive line, but I think the depth has been chipped away from like a long-term perspective for Cleveland because of the Watson money and all the draft capital that they've given up. They have a star in Myles Garrett who just elevates the entire defensive line. I think the secondary, because we know secondary play can fluctuate a little bit, they're still really talented with Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, and Greg Newsome. Emerson and Newsome didn't have a great season last year, certainly not compared to 2023. So I think there's still a lot of talent on the team. I also agree that they've been chipped away at. So they went from a team where if we were looking, they were kind of like the Broncos a couple of years ago, outside of the quarterback, where you'd look at the roster and say there's not a whole lot of holes on this roster. Now there are more holes, a bigger question at quarterback, but not enough for me to put them in the bottom five at the moment.
They've definitely had a year in the previous sort of half dozen seasons in the Andrew Berry tenure where they've had the best roster in the NFL without absent quarterback, right? Numbers 2 through 53, they've had the best roster in the NFL. And then that's why they went aggressively after a guy like Deshaun Watson, only for him to not be that guy. And then the consequences of that investment having its impact on 2 through 53. And actually, I think this is where your line keeps coming back of Andrew Berry doing a really good job outside of the worst move that's ever been made in NFL history. This is where I think there's validity to it, because even though the roster has been chipped away at, I think he has generally done a really good job of the thing not completely spiraling out of control because of the amount of investment. Like they're suffering all the negative effects of paying a quarterback top tier money with none of the positives, right? Like they have the Joe Burrow contract on the books effectively, but without Joe Burrow. Well, with a nobody at quarterback at the moment. And that's insane. That should be like, it's literally the biggest handicap anybody's dealing with in the NFL right now. The 49ers have had the biggest boost with Brock Purdy's contract for the last 3 years. And the Browns have had the opposite. They've had the worst contract in football dragging them down, and they've still had a reasonable good roster around them. I think this is the year, though, where it's had the most negative consequences when you look at what they have on paper.
All right, so my fourth worst, I hate myself for this one. I have the Giants still at number 4. This is similar to the Patriots for me, where it's like, all right, we're moving in the right direction. Man, you could argue that they have the best defense. You could argue they have a better defensive line than the Eagles. I mean, you're projecting Abdul Carter. You're taking Dexter Lawrence, and you're kind of putting him in Myles Garrett for his position type of territory. Myles Garrett, of course, an edge. Dexter Lawrence as the best nose tackle of our lifetime, maybe. I mean, of recent NFL history, Dexter Lawrence. So maybe they have this great defensive line. I really like what they've done in the secondary at Paulson Adebo and bringing in Javon Holland. You could make an argument that that's starting 5. Not that it's the best in the NFL, but it's certainly better than it's been. But, you still have questions with Deonte Banks, questions on the offensive line, questions for receiver beyond Malik Neighbors. that's where, and then the quarterback's the biggest one, right? I mean, a Russell Wilson led team right now, or if Jackson Dart comes in and wins the job, but a Russell Wilson led team that is not loaded looks like one of the worst teams in the NFL. That's just where we are in Russell Wilson's career, and that's where the Giants are. So I think I don't love ranking them here because I think they've done a lot of good things, and I keep making the statement, right? If everybody gets fired and I'm applying for this job a year from now, like, I'll feel good about the nucleus that they've left behind, but I don't know if I'll feel great about the depth everywhere, and there still might be a quarterback question depending on what happens with Dart.
I don't think you're crazy at all. I had the Giants escaping with the bottom 5, but I get it. I mean, they're in a similar category to the Patriots in terms of, I do think they have quite a broad range of outcomes. The difference for me is that I at least like what I've seen from a lot of the young players that they are relying on, whereas the Patriots, it's total unknowns, right? It's either rookies or second-year players that showed nothing year one. The Giants, at least, are relying on a lot of guys that showed a lot year one, right? Like Malik Neighbors already looks like a superstar. Tyrone Tracy looks really good, and now you've added Scatterboot to that mix. Theo Johnson, I think, looked very good in limited action. The secondary guys that they've got, Andrew Phillips, Tyler Newbin, they looked good as well. Like, that entire rookie class already showed something, and now you're expecting them to build on it and get even better. The D-line you talked about, I think, is in really good shape. They've got some players scattered around that defense elsewhere. Bobby Okereke is a good linebacker. The secondary you mentioned, Javon Holland, Tyler Newbin, I think, is a really good safety tandem. They've got weaknesses, sure, but like, there's a lot of good there. I generally like the offensive weaponry. The offensive line is definitely a concern, and Russell Wilson being where he is a concern. But even like, obviously the Russell Wilson career arc and reputation has taken a hammering in the last few years. He's still better than any quarterback on the Browns. Like, that puts them fair. Higher on this rankings, than me.
Yeah,
or for me.
I understand. The other challenge with, like, I said I don't love putting New England here, and I don't love putting the Giants here. I mean, I'm just still looking up and down the NFL. Like, I don't know who else fits in a bottom 5 roster category. It's really challenging to find teams that are that bad from a roster perspective. Third worst roster. So you already mentioned you had the New England Patriots as third worst. So you're fit. You went Dolphins, Browns, Patriots.
Yep.
I went Patriots at 5, Giants at 4. I've got the New York Jets at 3. This one, these last 3 started to get a little bit easier. I think the Jets really? Go for it. Yeah, I thought so. I mean, I think you're starting to separate teams a little bit. Again, there's hope. I mean, there's for maybe the team after this, I think there's some hope. There's trajectory. But for the Jets, we have a transitional quarterback in Justin Fields. You have these go-for-it type of moves, Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers. All the big-name talents are gone. I think the defensive line depth has taken a bit of a hit, though it's not awful. Secondary depth has taken a hit. Brandon Stevens going to potentially start here opposite Sauce Gardner. So a lot of the things that you liked about this Jets team, no longer there. I think the offensive line is good. I think it's one of the worst pass catcher groups in the NFL. Garrett Wilson, really good. Questions or unknowns beyond that. So, I mean, look, I always start with the pass game, and this group of quarterback plus receivers is one of the worst. Now, to repeat the thing I've said all offseason, Justin Fields, 8-3, did I say, or 8-4 in his last 12 starts? Like, he does have this. Maybe he is this high floor quarterback where the run game offsets a lot of these different things, right? Just a much lesser version of what we talked about with Hurts. Certainly could be the case, but if we're going player for player, I think the Jets are in this bottom 5 here.
Yeah, I don't know. I have the Jets. They're outside of my bottom 5. I think there's too much talent on this roster to have them as a bottom 5 roster. I get it. They're definitely in the conversation just because the bottom 12 teams in the NFL are in this conversation. But I had the Jets escaping the bottom 5. I think the combination of talent that they have is just too much. And yeah, okay, quarterback is definitely a problem spot, but it's not. Again, it's a bit like the Russell Wilson thing. Like, Justin Fields is better than the Browns situation, and so
yes,
the rest of the talent it escapes.
And let's be clear here, we both said we like the move to get Justin Fields because that's in relation to the other options that were out there. The other options were, well, there's no free agents and you're picking at 7, and who are you going to pick at 7? And clearly no one wanted any other quarterback in the top 10 besides Cam Ward. So given all the options available for a team with a new head coach in transition from the post Aaron Rodgers era, why not buy low on Justin Fields?
Yeah.
I mean, you paid him some healthy money, but it's like, high. It's the lowest end of starter money that you can pay. So I like that as a move. But if I'm sitting here stacking up rosters for 2025, I'm not saying, man, watch out for the Jets. They're going to make a playoff run.
Right. And he's also clearly worse than Tua and probably worse than Drake May based off last year's evidence as well. So he's definitely bad enough that he could be in this bottom 5 based off. But Quinnen Williams is an all-pro superstar. Garrett Wilson is a superstar caliber player. I like the backfield, the Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis combination that they've got there as well. The linebackers are good. They've still got Sauce Gardner. I just think there's too much talent on this team to have them as a bottom 5.
Yeah, I mean, they're similar. They're kind of similar to the Giants for me, that they're ranked one spot apart because, I can list plenty of good players on the Giants and a lot of the Abdul Carter young player that, could become a star. The Jets certainly have that, but, who else am I going to put in the bottom 5? All right. We both have to do our final 2. We might be on the same page here. Who's the second worst roster right now?
Yeah, to me, the final 2 was the separation. Like you talked about it being the bottom 3. I think the final 2 are where it actually. I think there is a worst roster in the NFL comfortably, and then I think there is a second worst roster in the NFL reasonably comfortably, and then I think it's like I don't want to rank anybody else in this bottom 5, and I've got to find 3 more teams. The second worst team in the NFL to me is the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, this potentially changes massively if Cam Ward looks like Jaden Daniels right off the bat. Like if he comes in and has another, like we've had CJ Stroud, we've had Jaden Daniels. If Cam Ward is the next rookie who just hits the ground running, looks amazing, changes the dynamic for Tennessee. But this is still a weak offensive line. It's a weak receiving core. It's got some serious holes on defense. Like there's just so many holes on this roster.
I mean, I wouldn't call it a weak offensive line. We've both said I think they could be in creep back toward average territory. Kevin Zeitler comes in. Dan Moore is but Dan Moore is average at left tackle. So I think
like their ceiling is average.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think they're better on the offensive line. We'll say that. I think they're weak in key spots, though. That's what it comes down to. So unknown of the Cam Ward quarterback situation. Calvin Ridley as your top receiver, I don't think that's ever gone well, despite his little spurts of really good play. He's always been better when you say Calvin Ridley's our number 2 wide receiver. Life's always better for your offense if you're making that statement instead of he's our number 1. Defensive line, you and I both love T'Vondre Sweat, obviously love Jeffrey Simmons. The edge rush group is one of the worst in the NFL. So we're talking impact positions here. Are there questions at tackle? A little bit with Dan Moore and J.C. Latham, but I'm not going to hold that against them. Are there questions at the edge? Yes. Are there questions at corner? Yes. Like L'Jarius Sneed was injured last year. We didn't really get to see everything that he brought to the table. Cornerback 2 is a bit of a question there too. So all of the high value positions have some unknowns, questions, or just players who haven't played well, for the Titans.
And even Jeffrey Simmons, Jeffrey Simmons' good games are the rival of any of those other elite defensive tackles. He just doesn't have as many of them as those other guys. Like the good tape of Simmons looks like Quinnen Williams. It looks like, these other elite defensive tackles, but he doesn't have nearly the same consistency as those guys. And that's been the story of his career, literally since stepping onto an NFL field. Obviously, he came into the league coming off a knee injury. He came back quickly, and his first game back, he absolutely dominated. We're like, wow, Titans are geniuses. They took this guy high in the draft despite the knee injury. This is why. And he's just never been as consistent as those other guys. So even like one of their best 3 players on the roster is not quite as good as it feels like he should be.
It's also another one of those teams, like if they got better play in health from L'Jarius Sneed, that does upgrade the secondary. They've got some other solid players up and down the roster. I don't think they're a definitely destined to win four games this year or anything. I think they'll be better than last year. I also put that crazy stat out there that the defense didn't give up a ton of yards, but they gave up all those points, and special teams was awful, and that's a big part of the reason why they were picking number 1 overall. So there's a good, there's a chance they get better this year, especially if Cam Ward, shows some of those dynamic, downfield playmaking skills that he showed in college. But yeah, they're in transition, man. I mean, they were in transition 2 years ago. They decided to go half in, half out. They're now in full transition, and it's a youth movement there. So we're going to see a lot of youth in Tennessee. So they have to be, I would say, second worst right now in the NFL. But I think they're also the team maybe a year from now where that's changing, and you start to see them on the rise. All right, worst roster in the NFL. Who you got?
The New Orleans Saints, I believe, have fairly inarguably the worst roster in the NFL right now, in part because
I'm with you.
Their quarterback battle is a 3-way competition between Spencer Rattler, Tyler Shuck, and Jake Haener. And that I struggle to see a world where the winner of that competition brings even average quarterback play at the NFL level. And it's not like the rest of the roster around him is good enough to prop that up. So, yeah, I think the Saints have the worst roster now.
Yeah, I agree. And I brought out the stat. I think it was probably on draft weekend or when we were reviewing the Saints draft. This year they drafted 4, 8, 9 players. This is the first time, I think it was, that they were above 7 players drafted since 2015. I mean, this is, and so yeah, again, you're allotted 7 picks. Most teams end up with more, either through comp picks or trades. And sometimes, every now and again, teams end up, it has to balance out somewhere. But there's comp picks. You're allotted 7 plus comp picks. Most teams are going to be over 7.
Yeah, like you have to actively work to get less than that.
Yeah, and the Saints have a history. Now, recent years, they've been right around 7, right? They've been right at 7. But my whole point in this is they had so many years of 6, 4, 6, 5, back to back to back to back. And that just depletes your depth over time. Especially, we talk a lot about like, hey, the Lions are on this run, man. They are on this run of making great draft picks. It is so difficult to sustain. 2017, the Saints had maybe one of the best player-for-player drafts you'll ever see. Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramczyk, Marcus Williams, Alvin Kamara, Alex Anzalone, Trey Hendrickson, all in the first 3 rounds. All hits. Unbelievable. Not even all hits for them, but just all hits. Since that point, it's been hit or miss. And that's why they're here. That's my big why they're here. The defensive line's depleted. The secondary is depleted. The offensive line is depleted. The receiving core is depleted. The quarterback situation is what you told me, right? So I go the high-end position groups that need to be good are all question marks on the Saints right now.
Yeah, they definitely a huge part of it. And obviously, I think this is ultimately like they were kicking the can down the road for the better part of a decade, trying to extend the Drew Brees window to win another Super Bowl. And I think this is the last vestiges of that, like really coming home to haunt them and to the impact of it being felt. I think they are changing how they do things. I think they are moving in a better direction. Obviously, that's a big part of that is finding the quarterback, and they were not in a great position for that this year, right? Number one, teams seem to view this draft as kind of like a 1 quarterback deep draft, but even then they were picking at 9. If they didn't like Shedeur Sanders, this was basically all they could do is, well, who do we like? Let's try and get one at the top of the second. Tyler Shuck ends up being the guy. It's probably a placeholder, right? It's probably we're effectively punting on quarterback this year, rolling the dice a little bit, but next year is when we're going to be looking for the guy. But again, like a bit like we said this, I don't think this is as bad as rosters have been in the past. Like it is, I think, comfortably the worst roster in the NFL. I don't think it's like years away. Like this is a 5-year project that's going to take them, to rebuild. I think they could put this thing back together pretty fast if they find a quarterback. Obviously, that's easier said than done. But like, okay, Chris Olave is a question mark because of concussions, but he's a really good player. Rashid Shaheed is a really good player, albeit one coming back from injury. Brandon Cooks, Foster Moreau, Juwan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Devin Neal now in the backfield. Like they've got some players that could form a really useful skill position troop. The offensive line is definitely a weakness, but equally you could see that form. Like
But young,
Compare
right? I
that to the
mean,
Titans. You
Fuanga,
can imagine
yeah,
that being average.
Fuanga and Kelvin Banks. I thought those were two good picks the last couple of years. Like that, Eric McCoy still one of the better centers in the NFL when he's healthy. Like
Right.
there's potential there for sure. Like it's not. I agree with you. It's not all lost.
Like Trevor Penning could be a better guard than he was a tackle. Cesar Ruiz has had wildly volatile performances from terrible to reasonably good. Like you could picture a world where that offensive line becomes perfectly manageable. Their edge rusher duo, I think, is pretty solid. Chase Young and Carl Granderson now. They could use some depth there, but the starters are fine. Defensive tackle is a wasteland. I think that's awful right now. It's maybe the worst defensive tackle group in football. But again, like that's one draft pick away from being a different dynamic, right? Like I do think it's the worst roster in football, but I don't think it would take that much to make this better.
Yeah, they do have a sprinkling of veterans. Demario Davis still playing pretty high level of football late in his career at linebacker, but that's part of the problem here too for them is Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, Justin Reed. Are those guys going to be a part of the rebuild 2 or 3 years from now, or are they just? I mean, those are all good starters right now on the defensive side of the ball. Questions at cornerback though, but yeah, I mean, when we're talking about other rosters we've ranked as worst, I keep going back to that Cardinals team where they just got out of this. Everybody on their defensive line should be second string instead of starting, and that was how we described the Cardinals on the offensive line, defensive line, and secondary a couple of years ago. Maybe even at receiver, where it's like, man, none of these guys should really start. They're rebuilding. Dolphins in 2019. When they were like accused of tanking and may have been. I mean, within the last 5 or 6 years, there have been some horrendous rosters where there's a team that you look and you're like, this team is destined to pick number 1 overall. They might not get there, they might sneak a couple wins by accident, but there's always a team or two on paper where you're like, definitely the number 1 overall pick type of team. I think the Saints are the worst roster, but again, if they snuck five or 6 wins in the NFC South as well, you're not going to be completely surprised. So, yeah, I agree. We've softened the blow here on all of this. The 5 worst rosters, but closer to the pack than a linear ranking would suggest.
I think there's more separation at the top of the roster rankings than there is at the bottom. Like I think there are a clear group of like best rosters in the NFL, but I think the bottom dozen teams in the NFL belong in the same kind of bucket. I think the Saints are clear worse. I think the Titans are probably the clear second worst. But like the next 10 teams are almost interchangeable. Like PFF has their roster rankings out at the moment. Like they have teams ranked they have the Panthers ranked dead way down the bottom. I don't think the Panthers are a bottom 5 roster, but with similar caveats, like you got to put somebody into the bottom 5. Like I think they're very close together.
All right, so let's do this. Let's recap your top 5. Let's go to the best rosters, the worst rosters. Let's both recap what we've done and then maybe talk about other teams that we considered or that just got cut. So repeat again your top 5 best rosters in the NFL.
Number 5 for me, I have the Denver Broncos, assuming some development from Bo Nix and the group that they have there. Number 4, I have the Buffalo Bills. Number 3, the Baltimore Ravens. Number 2, the Detroit Lions. And I think number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles still have the best roster in the NFL.
All right, so my top 5 best rosters in the NFL. I'm going Kansas City Chiefs at number 5. Starts with the star power, Mahomes, quarterback, depth across most of the roster, and more question marks than previously, but still a really good team. Baltimore Ravens, fewer question marks. Lamar Jackson at quarterback. They've got stars. They have depth. Philadelphia Eagles, I think their roster, they're number 3 for me. They've taken a bit of a hit, 4 new starters, but still loaded where it matters, the trenches, and at quarterback and receiver. Buffalo Bills are number 2 for me. I think what they've done to just churn the roster over the last couple of years, but remain strong. Entire offensive line coming back, MVP Josh Allen coming back, enough pass catchers to put points on the board, and the defensive line depth and the secondary depth that they've added have the Bills at number 2. And then the Lions number 1 for me. I think the job that Brad Holmes has done the last couple of years, few holes on the roster, stars on both sides of the ball, pass catchers, Jared Goff getting the best ball of his career out of Goff because of all the offensive line and the pass catcher depth. And then the way they've rejigged the secondary over the last couple of years to remain relevant. I've got the Lions at number 1. Let's go. How about your bottom 5 worst rosters in the NFL right now?
Yeah, 5 worst rosters in the NFL was tough. I ended up going with Miami Dolphins at number 28. I just think this roster has kind of fallen apart around the good places or pieces that they had in place. Number 29, the Cleveland Browns. That's one of the worst quarterback rooms in the game, and the roster has fallen apart around those quarterbacks as well. Number 30, the New England Patriots. Massive range of outcomes. They could be good this year if all those young players bring something positive to the table, or they could be the worst roster in the NFL again if last year repeats itself and none of the young players make an impact. Number 31, the Tennessee Titans. Again, a lot rests on Cam Ward if he's amazing right off the bat. If he's the next, CJ Stroud or Jaden Daniels, probably changes the complexion. But I think overall the roster around him is in bad shape. And then number 32, I think the New Orleans Saints are comfortably the worst roster in the NFL right now. No quarterback to speak of, and an incredible amount of holes on the roster elsewhere.
All right. In my bottom 5, I had the New England Patriots at number 5. I hated listing the bottom 5. I think it's very close, but tough to put other teams in the bottom 5. Patriots at 5, even though they're on the ascent. New York Giants at 4, 4th worst, even though they're on the ascent. Love the defensive line, some of the secondary depth, but questions at quarterback and the offensive line, playmaker beyond Malik Neighbors are tough ones for me. New York Jets, I think they're in transition. Post Aaron Rodgers, I have them as the 3rd worst roster. Still have some star power. They've got some big-name players on the defensive side of the ball, Garrett Wilson, but the Justin Fields playmaker combination, I've got them 3rd worst right now. Tennessee Titans, they're rebuilding. They're getting younger. Still have questions on the offensive line, even though it's getting better. One of the worst pass rushes in the NFL, and I'm not sure that they upgraded it this offseason. Questions in the secondary. Cam Ward could change everything for Tennessee, but still have them at 2nd worst right now as they transition. And then the Saints, I agree with you, worst roster in the NFL because questions at most of the key position groups, even if they're getting a little bit younger at a couple, coming out of some cap issues, but they're not completely gone. And then probably the on paper worst quarterback situation in the NFL, unless Tyler Shuck is as good as some people liked him on film, but we'll see. It's definitely transition time in New Orleans as far as their roster goes. Any teams on either end, who else could sneak into the best rosters and then worst rosters? Like who was close here for you?
So the Chiefs, I think, they would be my next team, first honorable mention or whatever. I think the Rams, Vikings, and Bucks would be teams that I would have pushing that top 5.
The Vikings are the one. Again, when you have an unknown at quarterback, that's tough. Like if they had re-signed Sam Darnold and we had seen, even though Darnold having another great year is a bit of an unknown, but we at least saw him do it with Minnesota. If they had re-signed Darnold, they'd probably get into the top 5 for me, the way they've built that team.
Right. And then the other team actually that I would throw out there, if they had a quarterback that you had confidence in, the Colts they have one of the best 2 through 53 man rosters in the league, but their quarterback is a battle between Richardson and Daniel Jones, and I just can't give that credit.
I'm torn on the Colts because I think they're more just solid, average to solid players than impact players. So they're still probably in the middle for me. I'll tell who did I not have? So yeah, I would have said the Vikings are a just miss team for me as far as their roster depth. Tampa Bay, I agree with. They could be up there. Consider the Chargers, but maybe now the Rams, I would say, which is fascinating, right? The Rams and the Vikings are 2 teams that were not here 2 years ago. They were not on this list as far as the best. Texans would be close for me. The offensive line questions aside, I think but a lot of that's based off of hope as well. On the bottom end, I really don't know who else I want to sneak in there. I know the Jaguars didn't feel like a good team at the end of last year.
Yeah, I mean,
but I don't think their roster's awful.
No, the bottom is awful because I didn't like ranking the teams that were ranked there. So it's not teams that I would want to find a spot for. It's like teams that also should at least be in the conversation along with the teams that I didn't want to put down there to begin with. The Jags should at least be mentioned in that bucket. Carolina, we mentioned that the PFF had them down there. I don't think they're nearly that bad. You had the Giants. I didn't. So the Giants, I think, are probably at least in that conversation. Who else did I have down there that didn't make that list? The Raiders, I think, are probably in the vicinity, though I think they've done good work and moved in the right direction. Like, it's not, again, I think the bottom 12 teams in the NFL roster-wise are in pretty solid, or in the same kind of bucket.
Yeah, any team you're going to list, there's going to be some level of hope attached to it, or maybe they, kind of like their draft, and maybe it doesn't show up this year, but it's in the right direction. So let us know what we forgot, what we missed. Best and worst rosters in the NFL. So I guess I forgot that I had already announced who we have coming up Thursday. It is, the chat mentioned it. It is Tom Telesco. We'll see if we can definitely get him. Tom Telesco is going to join Thursday, 9 a.m. New start time. Started last week, 9 a.m. throughout the offseason on both Monday and Thursday for the NFL draft. And Tom was there for the Ricky Williams trade that year. He was in Indianapolis the year that the Ricky Williams trade happened. And I want to get into that because the Colts had the Ricky Williams offer and they took Edgerrin James instead. If anybody remembers any of that stuff. But yeah, we'll talk also more recent stuff, the Chargers, the Raiders. But I also want to go all the way back to 1999 and talk some old school scouting stuff with Tom. Yeah. You got anything else?
No, I'm happy to hear that we're going to be talking about stuff that happened in this millennium as well as the previous one.
Let us know drop any questions in the comments, and I'll look for those for Tom. We're going to record that hopefully tomorrow for Thursday, and so drop some questions in the comments here or in the chat. And I like that question. I asked Tom how to get a GM job. I'll ask for advice. I'm 0 for 1 in GM interviews. He got a Raiders job by accident last year, right? He wasn't even supposed to be getting a second job, right? The guy's just so good at GM interviews that he got it. So should ask for advice here. Find out.
Nice.
All right, you're done. All right, great. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Thursday with more Check the Mic.